How you doing? Sweet Apple Acres is a place synonymous with My Little Pony. I'm pretty sure pretty much everyone watching this is familiar with it. Unless you've never watched the show before, which in that case, what exactly are you doing here? Anyway, despite Sweet Apple Acres being so famous, it's shrouded in mystery. Of course we know that every Applebuck season apples are harvested from the trees, which they either sell directly or turn into cider, and for 5 short days Zap apples are in season. And only harvestable for 1 day, so technically 1 day. Which are then also sold. This is all well and good, but thinking deeper into it, some questions were raised, at least for me. How come Sweet Apple Acres never changes? They have all these apples that they harvest and never seem to benefit from them, at least visually. And that led me to want to figure it out. How profitable Sweet Apple Acres actually is. With a fictional business like Sweet Apple Acres, where does one even start when figuring out how much profit they make? Well, I'm going to split it up into 3 sections. Firstly, figuring out the raw apple production of the farm every harvest. Second, adding the extra products like cider and Zap apples. And third, factoring in the costs and things like that would detract from the final net profit they'd make. Pretty much everything I say in this video is speculation, since the show is naturally extremely inconsistent with this kind of thing. But I'm still going to try my best to use resources from actual episodes to find the numbers. In some places that won't be possible, so I'm going to be using real life things I found from research, but we'll try and keep to the show as much as possible. Before I start on this investigation of sorts, I do want to mention that the idea for this video was inspired by a video Starstrike made a while back, figuring out how much money Rarity makes, so go and check that out if you haven't already, it's a pretty cool video. Anyway, let's get on with my actual video. So, as mentioned earlier, we're going to start by figuring out the raw total number of apples that the farm produces at every harvest. Unfortunately, most of the footage we need to gather this data is in one of the earliest episodes in the entire show, Applebuck season. To figure out the number of apples, we need to first figure out how many trees there are. In the opening shot of the episode, before the camera even pans, there are 87 trees, give or take. With some of them, it's hard to tell individual trees apart. For each number I say, assume there's a give or take of a few trees. Once the camera pans enough to show us a whole new set of trees, I counted 104 more on this right hill. I'm not counting these trees in the background on the hills because they don't have any visible apples. Also, it seems that they aren't part of the orchard since they're very distant from any other trees. On this left hill here, I counted 74 visible trees. However, AJ and Big Mac block part of the hill, so we can't know the exact number. I estimated 12 hidden, so I'm going to be using the number 86 for our total for the left hill. The next shot shows us the valley between both hills, in which I counted around 106 trees, which includes a few trees on either side of Big Mac and AJ that we couldn't see before. So now that we got all these values, adding them up, we get 383, so I'm just gonna stop myself there. Before I get too carried away with any ultimately pointless calculations, because although it seems, and I initially thought, that working out the total number of apples this way was smart, or at all efficient, it isn't. I mean, sure, I got this number, 383, but what does that actually mean? Nothing. There's no way of knowing how big of a fraction this area here is of the entire farm, so basically, we're back to square one. Being in the position I now was, I did what even the strongest souls do when met with such dilemmas, and turned to Reddit, where it turned out someone had asked exactly the same question I wanted answered. How many acres is Sweet Apple Acres? This is one of those questions that is actually really complicated, and I could make a video in and of itself, but 100% transparency, I can't really be bothered right now, so I'm just going to take values from the reply to this post. One user who actually apparently owns an orchard maintained by 3 people like Sweet Apple Acres said their orchard was a total of 80 acres, and gave an estimate of 50 to 125 acres for the farm. Some people gave much higher estimates, however, I think it's important to take into account that modern farms utilize a lot more machinery and overall mechanization than Sweet Apple Acres. While there is machinery in Equestria, it's not at the same level, and also we can see that at least in Sweet Apple Acres, Applejack, Big Mac and Granny Smith do things with a more traditional method. So I think we're going to run with 2 numbers here, 50 and 125. If you wanted to use the correct terms, 50 would be our conservative estimate, and 125 would be our liberal estimate. But I'm just going to call it small estimate and big estimate. So now we have these 2 estimates for number of acres, we need to figure out how many trees are actually in those acres. Not being an apple orchard extraordinaire or whatever they're called, I again turned to the internet, but not Reddit this time, no. It was in fact the one and only Adam's Apples, Fruit Tree Nursery, UK Plant Passport 126156. What I managed to gather from there was that most orchards have a range of 40 to 50 trees per acre. We'll use the median value of those 2 numbers, 45 going forward, for the number of trees per acre. And the final number we need is the amount of apples per tree, which we can actually get with a similar method to my original approach, that is, using footage from the show to figure out numbers. In this shot, Applejack bucks a tree. We see all the apples fall out of said tree. I counted 33 going down frame by frame, but it wasn't 100% clear. I might have miscounted at points, however, unless you want to go back and look at it yourself, there's nothing I can do about that. So that's our number. Now that we've got all these separate numbers, let's get a couple of answers for the first question. How many apples are produced per year? Well, the smallest answer, using our small estimate of 50 acres, would be the 45 trees in an acre, multiplied by the amount of acres, 50, giving us 2,250 trees, and multiplying that by 33, giving us 74,250 as a low estimate for total number of apples produced per season. For our high value, we do the same thing, just with 125 instead of 50, giving us 5,625 trees and 185,625 apples in said trees. Based off some quick Google searches, the average price for a single apple is somewhere between 60 cents to $1.50, depending on weight, so let's just call it like 80 cents per apple. With our small estimate, sweet apple acres would make $59,400 per season, and then with our larger estimate, they're making $148,500 per season from just raw apple production. And we actually think we're just going to run with the high estimate here, since $59,400 is a bit low compared to some of the values I get later, and it just sounds better with $148,500. Okay, fight me, that's what we're using. Raw apple production isn't the only thing we have to factor in. As mentioned in the intro, there are 3 things we need to do. Figuring out raw apple production, which we've done, adding on extra stuff, and finally just taking away costs like maintenance. And then we'll have the final profit number. So now we're going to look at cider and zap apples. Cider is actually mostly possible to figure out through footage from the show, and we can get all said info from Super Speedy Cider Squeezy 6000. We can figure out how many tankards of cider are sold till the apples run out by counting the number of ponies visible before Dashi, since every pony before her gets 1, and thankfully this shot is actually really clear and it's relatively easy to make out how many individual ponies there are, unlike the trees and apples I tried to count earlier. I counted 92 visible, including the shadowed blue ones up until Rainbow Dash, which we can identify because the camera zooms onto her at the end of the shot. But 92 isn't our final number because there are 2 spots where the view of the line is obstructed, namely behind this hill and this row of trees. With the trees, I approximated the distance it took up and simply looked at how many ponies long that distance was in the visible part in front of the trees, which was 13. Then added 5, since the further away ponies get, the closer together they would appear, so it wouldn't be 1-to-1 with how many could fit in front. Behind the hill is more of a shot in the dark. I mean, behind the trees was too, but for the hill I don't have anything to base it on really. The number I ended up deciding on was about 30, which is similar to how many are visible in front of the hill. Judging by the way it curves round, I'd say by eye, those 2 distances, that is, in front of the hill and behind the hill, are about the same. So adding those values up leaves us with 140 ponies till Dashi, meaning if each pony takes 1 cider, that's 140 tankards of cider. The issue with this is we see Pinky here taking 9 tankards, and because of that we can't for sure guarantee no pony else took more than 1. But there's not really much I can do about that, so I'll add 8 extra to our total to factor in Pinky's cider haul, but we're assuming everyone else just took 1. So 148 tankards till they ran out. And typically, German tankards hold around 500 milliliters of liquid, so that means 74,000 milliliters or 74 liters of cider in 1 day. And cider season is longer than a day. We never, at least to my knowledge, and from what I could find online, get a solid number for the length of cider season. All I have to go off is Spike's line here.
Yeah, that means it's only 30 more days till Sapphire season!
So from that, we're just going to assume cider season is 30 days. 30 times 74 gives us 2,220 liters of cider over cider season. Okay, cool. But now what? Well, this is quite convoluted. I mean, the other stuff was convoluted, but just try and stay with me. 1 liter of cider takes approximately 2 kilograms of apples to make in real life. There are about 5 apples to a kilogram, so 10 apples for 1 liter of cider. Multiply that by 2,220 and we get 22,200 apples used over the cider season. These apples won't be sold as the normal ones are, so we'll first multiply them by 0.80 to figure out how much they're actually worth, which is approximately $17,760. And then, subtract that from our running total profit of $148,500, leaving us with $130,740. But obviously this cider has to be worth something. Trying to figure this out using the show's monetary system here is kinda hard since it's not consistent. Some ponies give 1 bit, others 2, and they all get 1 tankard. Meanwhile, Pinky dumps her entire life savings down and gets 9. I think it's just better again to resort to some real life numbers. I don't know about anyone watching from other countries, but in the UK, from what I could see, the average price per litre of cider is around £3 to £4, which is $4 to $5.50, give or take. I think we'll just say $5 though, because remember each litre takes 10 apples, which are each 80 cents, meaning each litre takes $8. So we're going to use 5 to let the apples off a little more gently because they're making the cider at a loss. Questionable business move, but I mean, it's a kids show, so what are you gonna do? So yeah, $5 per litre, 2,220 litres across cider season. They make $11,100 from cider season. Opposed to the $17,760 they put in, they end up losing $6,660, bringing the final standing profit up to $140,840. But don't worry, not all hope is lost. If there was any at the start, I mean, they still made $140,000 per harvest season, but maybe they sell the cider at a loss because the Zap apples give them so much more. When it comes to Zap apples, it's mostly speculation. They're only harvestable for one day in the year. The only idea I had for figuring out how many could be harvested in a day was to assume that apple buck season is 30 days, which is a big assumption, and then divide the total number of apples from earlier by 30, giving us 6,188 in a day. I guess since we don't have much else to go off, we'll have to use that. Zap apples aren't sold individually, however. They're turned into Zap apple jam. I actually learned something new while researching this. Apple jam is actually a thing, and it takes about 6 apples to make. Honestly, I never heard of it before. You learn something new every day, huh? Anyway, if we divide our total Zap apple harvest by 6, we get 1,031 jars of Zap apple jam. I saved the hardest part for last though. How much is a jar of Zap apple jam? Unlike cider, we don't even get a shot of a pony giving bits, so there's not really anything to go off of. The closest thing we have to a Zap apple that I could find in real life is a black diamond apple. A really rare and beautiful looking apple that can cost up to $21. But like, that's not as rare as a Zap apple. They're only available for one day after all and created enough wealth for Ponyville to be founded. So I'm thinking higher than $21. But also we have to think about how much a pony is actually willing to pay for a jar of Zap apple jam. I think due to the rarity, if something like Zap apple jam existed, the highest amount the average person would pay for it would be around $35. Obviously rich people would probably spend thousands, just look at designer clothes, but they wouldn't be able to sell 1,031 jars to just rich ponies. I mean, Filthy Rich only gets the first 100, so the remaining 931 still have to go to some pony. It's possible that number is slightly inflated, but again, what are you gonna do? So 1,031 jars at $35 each is $36,061, completely separate to the normal apple harvest, so nothing here takes anything away from our running profit. However, we do get to add an extra 36k on. So our final number is $176,165. I'm sure you're all bored with me waffling by now, but we're almost there. We just need to factor in running costs. However, unlike real life, there aren't nearly as much of them. From what we can see in the show, the apples do most of everything themselves, without machinery or employed help, keeping their costs really low. Obviously, it probably costs a bit to maintain their barns, but maybe the equivalent of like $4,000 a year, but other than that, I can't really see them actually paying for much more. Obviously there are labour hours put in, lots of them, but they don't have employees, so no extra costs from those hours. So all we have to do now is take away $4,000 from our total, and we have it. The total net profit of Sweet Apple Acres per year, because I assume there's only one season of everything per year, is $172,165. Alrighty, so I feel like I need to acknowledge the inaccuracies throughout the process before the end of the video. Naturally, there was tons of speculation and estimates there. I mean, there's literally no way of figuring this out concretely, and since, to my knowledge, no one else has tried to so far, at least in video form, my number is the only one out there. Despite that, please don't take my number as the definitive answer. I'm sure you could see there's so many flaws in what I was saying, and in the future, someone may make a video like this and do a much better method. Maybe people in the comments will have a better method than me, so just treat my number and calculation as the closest current estimate, rather than the actual number. And that's going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. Damn, this video took a while and was quite technical as well, in terms of what I was saying. I don't know if it was at all interesting to listen to, or just really boring, so please let me know if you like this style and you guys would want to see more analytical videos like this in the future where I actually try and use real world values and analyze the show to figure out things that you shouldn't want to figure out. If you did enjoy the video, please consider leaving a like down below, and while you're down there, subscribe if you haven't already. If you want to support the channel even more, you could become a channel member. Thanks to the Red Ravioli, Creative Zone, and MyFumi for being monotonal members. And with that, thanks for watching, I've been Monodash, and I'll see you sometime soon.